Well, New South Wales' new Labor leader has set out his agenda for the party as state parliament returns. And Chris Minns joins us live now. Chris, good morning to you. Thanks for your time. A win for you yesterday, so that's not a bad start, which forced a backflip on cemeteries. John Barilaro, though, still believes there's got to be some middle ground here, something that is more politically palatable. Is there?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I think there is. We need to talk with the Catholic Cemeteries Trust, and John Barilaro obviously has taken over the responsibility for this policy from the existing Minister, Melinda Pavey. Look, at the end of the day, Peter, this is good news. This is a result that we wanted, and I'm glad common sense has finally prevailed. We're not going to criticise the government when they get it right and they back down on a decision that wasn't good and wasn't in the interest of the people of this state.
The problem, though, is that Sydney is running out of space for cemeteries. That is the fundamental problem, right? So what do you do about that?
Yeah, I mean, 30% of burials in Sydney are the responsibility of the Catholic Cemeteries Trust. 70% are either government trusts that already exist, or they're done by local councils. So really the problem is jointly shared between all those organisations. The problem with this proposal is by extinguishing this 150-year-old charity that would all be run by the New South Wales government, and really financially and in terms of future space, they don't have the track record to get the job done. So I thought that a difficult situation could get worse if they extinguish the Catholic Cemeteries Trust. Look, at the end of the day, common sense has prevailed. The Premier stepped in, and we're going to be positive and praise them when they do the right thing.
You're still going to have to cut the numbers, right, though? Cut the groups?
Cut the groups in terms of the religious organisations?
Yeah,
well, they're all represented on the state trusts. All of the faith groups are represented on the state trusts. The government minister appoints the boards for all those trusts. So they're all going to be represented, but clearly the government will have to sit down with all faith groups. I'm hopeful John Barilaro gets this right. The current minister didn't speak with the Catholic cemeteries for 6 months. Look, that's no way to get what is a complicated issue done. Communication needs to be the cornerstone of this process. And look, as I said, I'm glad they've reversed course.
OK, your first question to Parliament was on paramedic wages. Do you support tomorrow's strike action?
I don't want that strike action to go ahead, and I'm very hopeful that the Premier intervenes to stop it. I did think shining a spotlight on it in question time yesterday was very important. New South Wales paramedics are the lowest paid in Australia. They worked extremely hard during the pandemic. They stood up for us, and I think it's time for New South Wales to stand up for them. And realistically, there's a lot to disagree with on the bear pit of the New South Wales Parliament, but one thing we all agree with is paramedics worked extremely hard during a very difficult period.
Well, the government, though, has the support of the IR Commission. Shouldn't job creation be the priority?
Yeah, of course that's right, but they're offering 1.04%. The Reserve Bank says that inflation at the moment is above 3%, and even though it's dipping down, it'll still be greater than the number that the government's offering paramedics. So, look, I don't think that's fair. They worked extremely hard during this period. I spoke to paramedics yesterday, Peter, who said in the early days of the pandemic, they weren't aware of what this disease could do. They didn't have the right personal protection equipment, and yet they still turned up for work, went to their shifts, delivered for the people of this state, and I think it's time we stood by them today.
So you think the state can afford it?
I think they can, yes. I mean, this would, in the end, result in a net decrease in their pay once you take into account inflation. Now, paramedics work hard. They're not asking for millions of dollars each. All they're asking for is to keep pace with the cost of living in Sydney, which, as you'd be aware, is one of the most expensive cities on earth.
Yeah, but would that mean taking money out of something else? And what would that be?
Look, Well, I mean, look, the government has a net debt position of $100 billion, the greatest in the history of the state of New South Wales. This is nowhere near that amount of money. And ultimately, if we want good paramedics, we want them to stay in the profession, we want them to continue to do the great job they're doing, they're going to have to stump up. And I think what I tried to do on the floor of the Parliament yesterday was say to the Premier, you have the power to intervene. I believed her, actually, when she said that we're all in this together. This is a great way of demonstrating that by standing up for paramedics.
You've made a point of applauding the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. She is one of the most popular in the country. Where do you think she's vulnerable?
Look, I mean, I have made a point of that, Peter. I believed, and when I spoke to constituents in my community, none of them were, pining for our next media release, slamming a Berejiklian government minister or carping from the sidelines, and I don't want to lead an opposition like that. I mean, I think where the Labor Party can play a big role, and it's potentially in contrast to the government, is cost of living, particularly for people in Western Sydney. It's very difficult and very expensive to raise a family in this city. And I also want to focus on good regional jobs that are sustainable and are well paid into the future. But I think cost of living for families, and I think the next election, while the pandemic is dominating media coverage, and it should at the moment, the next election I think will be about what kind of economy and society we want to build once the pandemic's over.
So what's your response, and that might be it there, your response to people who may well be critical of your appointment, those people who say, well, different driver, same bus?
Well, look, I mean, I guess the onus is on me, to be honest with you. I mean, it's my job to unite the team, to present a credible plan to the people of this state over the next 2 years. I'm really cognizant of the fact that it's going to be difficult. I accept it's going to be very difficult. The Berejiklian government is very popular. But rather than trying to tear down a government and throw bricks over the fence at them, I think we're going to try something a bit different, present an alternative plan to the people of this state, and I guess come March 2023, be better than the New South Wales government.
OK, so one point on housing affordability. We know it's almost impossible for first home buyers to get into Sydney. What would be your plan for that? Would you support a move away from stamp duty towards a land tax, for instance?
Yeah, it's difficult to know where that's up to. I mean, the government released a discussion paper on it about 12 months ago now. There's no indication that it'll be in the budget that's due to be released in a couple of weeks' time. So it's unclear to me what that legislation would look like, what it would mean for home buyers. I'm concerned about a land tax that would be in place in perpetuity, so they'd have to pay potentially over $3,000 a year forever on the family home. That's never happened in New South Wales before. Housing affordability is a big issue. It's combined, I think, with a rising cost of living. Wages have remained flat. The cost of living has gone up. As you said, the cost of housing has gone up too. I mean, these are the pressures on working families that the New South Wales Labor Party will be focusing on in the coming 18, 24 months.
Chris Minns, good to have you with us. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.